Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Um, how long the live stream goes just kind of varies. Tonight, I actually think I'm only probably going to go for about an hour. It's been a long day and it's going to be a long day again tomorrow. Yes, so if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. For those of you that are new, uh, just kind of FYI, you can subscribe to when I go live by texting the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. Also, if you would like words of encouragement, you can text the words I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999. So let's see if anybody is coming on here this week. How's everybody's week been going? Anything new and exciting? Gary is here. Hey, Gary. He says, Hi, Dana. Hello, hello. How's your week been? Anything new and exciting going on with you? UNA is here. Hello. Jack is here. He says, Howdy, Gary. Colleen says, Hello, it's been a while. It's great to see ya. Janine is here. Welcome, welcome. Oh no, Jack says, Pain is not exciting. Oh no, what's going on, Jack? Is it your back or is it something else? Kevin is here. He says, Hey, yeah. Hey, Kevin. Historia del Arte Clara says something in Spanish that I will probably pronounce incorrectly. So I think hello from Spain, I guess that's my best guess at what she's saying. So hello. Oh, well, hi, Lori. She says, I'm new to the group. My coworker Dave told me about you. Well, we're glad that you could be here. So welcome. Oh, interesting. Historia del Arte Clara says in Spain, we are having a kind of Me Too for emotional abuse. Interesting. It's one of those things with emotional abuse or neglect. It's one of those topics that I think a lot of people have experienced, although well, and I was going to say, although it's different in some ways with sexual assault, uh, but it's not because there's a lot of sexual assault survivors out there that have trouble identifying that they've been sexually assaulted. And that's a very similar issue with emotional abuse is a lot of people walk around for decades and they're like, you know what? I feel really uncomfortable around a parent or a sibling or somebody that I dated. I'm just, and I can't quite pinpoint why. And it can take quite a bit of um, examining kind of what happened and a lot of the messages, kind of peeling back the layers of a lot of the messages that we've been telling ourselves or that other people have told us over the years that have minimized what we've been through of, oh, well, other people have it worse, or it could have been worse, or it's not that bad, or oh, you just need to move on, or things like that. And really the first step in healing is, I think, validation of that there was pain, that there was pain present. So let's see, Amy says 8 months, no contact. Best decision I've ever made. Wonderful. Well, congratulations. 8 months is fantastic. And she says, trauma bonds can be broken. Don't give up. Is there anything that you would be willing to share, Amy, um, in the chat about kind of some tips on what helped you to break those trauma bonds and what helped you to move forward? No pressure. If you're not comfortable sharing, that's completely fine. Historia del Arte Clara says a very famous celebrity is talking about emotional abuse. It's very interesting with all of the debate it's generating. Yes, emotion, again, it's one of those topics. It's happened. I think the vast majority of people out there have experienced some form of it, although they might not have realized it. And a lot of the discussion that I have seen in my time on the internet talking about this, which has been about 7 years now, um, is that it's uh, even though people understand how the disastrous effects of emotional abuse and how destructive it can be and how difficult it can be to heal from it, there's still this form of minimization that goes on. And, um, with like some along the line, what I see a lot online is, oh, well, it's not the same as physical abuse. And, um, kind of that people that struggle with emotional abuse, oh, you're just too soft kind of a thing. There's all kinds of invalidation and minimization of it. And the reality is that emotional abuse, it if it especially if it's not identified for what it is, it the effects can just be disastrous. And yeah, so I'm glad that there's discussion happening. I would be curious. I'll have to look it up and see if I can get some of it translated into English because I'd be curious to see what the discussion the discussion that's being had, and if there is, yeah, I guess if it's a similar discussion as something that would happen in the United States. I guess if you're open to sharing, what are some of your takeaways from the discussion or thoughts about the discussion that's happening? Let's see. Let me scroll up. Yes. Okay. So, one of Amy's tips for breaking trauma bonds, she says, yes, I will share. Rereading texts filled with abuse, going through my social media, quote unquote, happy looking posts, but being honest with myself. I had an abusive memory from the day of every single one of them. It opened my eyes to the realization it was all lies. Yes, that is a very powerful one of seeing that reality clearly and separating that in our minds of, do I miss this person, or is it the relationship that I hoped I could have had with this person? Because the reality is very different than the kind of the fantasy or the hope that I had about the relationship. I know in my experience too, that really helped me separating that of, because there was, on this one hand, I'm like, wow, I really love this person. I love this person. But it's like, well, but do you even really, when my case, which was kind of extreme, it was like, it was all deceit and it was, you know, um, so it's sort of like, well, gosh, I don't even really think you know this person. I don't even know if that person knows themselves. And so, yeah, who they pretended to be was pretty awesome, but it was all an act. And anybody would have loved that person because they were pretty cool, but that's not who they really are. And in separating that out, um, helped. Yeah, and she says no contact helps so much. Yes. Did you struggle with no contact at first? Because I know a lot of people do. And if so, do you have any tips on kind of what helped you to stay no contact? Okay, I speak my truth, says Dana. Please scroll up and read my post whenever you can. Okay, so let me scroll up. I speak my truth. Says, oh, Huffle Mom's here. Hi, Huffle Mom. I speak my truth says, yesterday or the day after, me and my mom got into a fight because she went into my room and threw my things on the floor. After the fight, I was craving my mom. Trauma bond is confirmed. She says, I know I need to go no contact, but then the fears kick in and I start predicting the worst. So, what that sounds like to me is, and this is the challenge when you have this kind of volatile or tumultuous relationship with a parent, especially, there's this part of us that is scared. They're afraid of the parent. I got to get out of here. I want to move out. Um, that's that self that's like, okay, that's trying to be protective. But because they're, especially when it's a parent, then there's that other side of ourself that just wants to be comforted and nurtured and held, because it is literally like that wounded child. But it's hard when it's our parent that's the one causing the pain, and it's our parent that we're looking to ease us of the pain. um, that's a challenge in those kinds of dynamics. So I think it helps to kind of get clear about that, of it's not necessarily that you were looking for your mother in that instance. It was that you were looking for mothering, that you were looking for that nourishing, um, you know, kind of that nourishing archetype of a mother to come in and be like, "Oh, honey, it's going to be okay," and to kind of hold you and to give you comfort. I only know kind of what you've shared here in the chat, but that that nurturing mother um, may or may not actually be your mother. Some mothers, some parents in general, kind of don't have that, or don't have that in the um, capacity, um, and to the degree that we need. And so sometimes it can help to just realize that. And frankly, I think it takes most children of abusive parents. It probably takes them decades to really realize that fully. It kind of comes in waves, but it takes a while to get to that place of acceptance of, oh, this is my mom or my dad's kind of limitations, and this isn't a reflection of me. It doesn't mean that, just like your mom's behavior is not a reflection of you. It doesn't mean that you're a bad child or unlovable or um, you know wrong, or any of these things. It's, this is how your mom is choosing to handle herself, and and that's not okay. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Leanne says, I started a journal of all of the things that happened, all the women I know that he cheated with, and I kept writing down all the memories every time I would miss him, and the trauma bond was so heavy. The journal helped me a lot. Yep. Reminding yourself of the reality. It'll snap you right back to it. And because, boy, nostalgia can just be so tricky, right? It can just kind of sneak in when you least expect it, when you're like, I'm never going back, I'm done, this is ridiculous, I deserve better, I know this, blah blah blah. And then next thing you know, nostalgia kind of creeps back in. Oh, maybe this time could be different. I mean, I guess I wasn't perfect either, and kind of all of these little doubts that start growing, or um, thinking kind of back to the good times, and writing down, making a list, and of all of the reasons, like, this relationship is not healthy. Like, these are the reasons I need to leave. Writing it down and reminding yourself can help snap you out of that fog. I Speak My Truth says the craving that she felt for her mom, she said it felt like a lot. It felt The craving felt a lot like sensations in my body, but it does make sense. I can imagine that it would feel like a sensation in your body, that feeling of, well, of overwhelm, of fear, of, um, just kind of wanting to be comforted, wanting to be around a safe person in a time like that. That makes a lot of sense. Helpful mom, I'm so sorry. She says, "Were we going to tackle my homework today, or are we going to put that off for another week?" Either is okay. We're going to have to put it off for another week. I've saved it to my desktop, and I have searched high and low, and for the life of me, I cannot find it. So to have to I'm going to have to figure that out. I'm going to have to dive into my email and figure it out. So I apologize. My guess is I think what I might have done is I copied it into another Word document that's on my desktop, thinking, "Oh, I'll just post it here, and then I'll like save it under a heading later." And I didn't. And so now it's a lot that I'm going to have to go through. So, ugh. Mm. Amy says, "One night I was trying to speak my truth and had a feeling he was going to hang up on me. And I told myself beforehand that if he did it, that would be the last time. He did. And it was very last time." Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. It's amazing how kind of with an ending also comes a new beginning. And in moments like that, where it's so clear of, okay, you know what? I told myself if he hangs up on me, then I'm done. And in that moment, we mean it. And also in that moment, that's when you start recovering your sense of self, like your dignity and respect. And it's that moment where we're like, you know what, I deserve better than this. I need somebody that can communicate effectively, and I'm not going to be treated like this. Not by him, not by anybody, not again. This ends here. It ends now. And that's that first kind of declaration, and like reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your power in your life. And it's so awesome because it just opens up this whole next chapter of your life, and this exploration of boundaries and standards, and kind of how did I get here, kind of a thing. And what do I want in my life, and what kind of people do I want in my life, and what's appropriate behavior and what's not, like, where are your deal breakers, like it opens up all of these questions. And it's kind of layer after layer when that happens. It's so powerful, though. It can kind of feel a little overwhelming at first, but it's really powerful in time. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. Um Okay. Melissa says, I spoke to my psychiatrist recently and told her about some issues I was having in my family with manipulation. She said, well, they're still a good person and just a little flawed. It felt like she was minimizing manipulation and gaslighting me to be okay with it. Yeah, I would agree. This kind of stuff, it's amazing how many of us um, are walking around with kind of disempowering messages about problematic behavior. And um, you know, this is one of them. This message of, well, nobody's perfect, or you've got to forgive and forget, or well, they're family, or it's not that bad, or it could have been worse, or like these kinds of disempowering messages. And it is minimizing and invalidating, and it does feel like gaslighting, because it's basically saying, well, uh, your perception of the problem isn't really a problem, and the reality is, no, it is. In situations like that, and I know it's easier said than done, um, but if you have the like wherewithal at the time to be able, um, to respond, then I would encourage that you do. So just because this person is a psychiatrist doesn't mean that they have all the answers. It doesn't mean that they never make mistakes. It doesn't mean that they know better than you. And in this instance, it doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong. So I'm a big fan of, especially when a person's, if we're like, if they're on my team, like my mental health team, then we need to have effective communication. And so it's, I guess what I'm saying is I encourage you to not let a comment like that slide, because my guess is, if somebody who's well intended says something like this, that's because they're speaking from their own unprocessed stuff of, oh, well, I was just trying to make her feel better, or I was um, kind of operating from the standpoint of it could have been worse, or whatever it was. It really doesn't matter what their mindset was, but I think it's worth bringing it up. So the next time that you see your psychiatrist, and this is assuming that you didn't discuss it in this last session. Um, I mean, I know for me, when situations like that happen, I probably 80% of the time I'm just left speechless, and I have to kind of like regroup and then readdress the situation. So if that's what happened to you, then I would encourage you to not just let it go, but to discuss it with your psychiatrist next time and say exactly that. Say, um, last time I shared with you that I had some family members that were being manipulative, um, and that was really problematic for me, their behavior, and and I had some concerns, that I felt like I just wanted to address them with you. That, you'd made the comment, well, they're still a good person and just a little flawed. And that felt really minimizing. And it doesn't matter if they still have good qualities about them. It doesn't matter if they have some flaws. That wasn't the point. The point is, I was kind of sharing, this is some ways that they were being manipulative. And I was wanting to discuss that behavior however you, in whatever context, in terms of talking about boundaries, or I was just venting about it, or again, whatever context you were, but letting the psychiatrist know, um, it just feels really invalidating and minimizing, because I get this, because it is, but then I also get this from a lot of other people too, of kind of, oh, this situation isn't that big of a deal. And the reality is, when somebody's being manipulative, it's always a situation that's worth addressing. So, um, so yeah. Okay, let me scroll up here. Gemma says, I left my narcissistic ex. It's been almost a month, but I'm not sure that I made the right decision. Is that normal? I hate that I feel this way. Okay, so I would encourage you to get maybe take out a piece of paper and or open up a Word document, whatever works for you, and write out, okay, why did you make this decision? Why did you leave? And then maybe also maybe write two columns, like why did you leave? And then kind of what's pulling at you, thinking, um, making you second guess your decision. Sometimes just getting those thoughts out of your brain and onto paper can can give you a lot of the clarity that you're looking for. So um, I'll just kind of share with you off the top of my head. I know a lot of people tend to struggle with, if I did, oh, did I do the right thing, in terms of basically, should I have stayed longer? Should I have tried harder? And if that's kind of what you're struggling with, then I would encourage you to kind of think about and to realize that it takes two people to make a relationship work. So you can't 100% make the relationship work. If the other person is not accountable for their behavior, if their communication is closed, if they're shut down, if they're there's a lot of lying, there's deceit, there's all kinds of relationship busting behavior, then y- you know your actions can only go so far. Like, we can't change another person. They have to want to change themselves. We can't 100% make a relationship work. To they have to not only want to, they have to do the work of trying to make it work. And um, yeah, so some other ways to think about it would be, um, you know, kind of getting clear on the different issues that you had in this relationship. Were you being treated with dignity and respect? I think that's a big one. Um, how how effective was the communication between the two of you? Um, um, what were the issues that continued to be unresolved? Was this person understanding mindset is really helpful too. You have kind of the team oriented mindset, which tends to be the kind of quote unquote like normal mindset, um, that most people tend to have, which is this team orientedness of, hey, let's find a solution, let's work on this together, let's make this work, kind of a thing. But then you have that domination driven mindset, and a person, keep in mind too, they might not be in either one of those mindsets 100% of the time. It might be just with certain things or certain issues. But especially if it's consistently domination driven, where everything's a win lose. It's got to be their way or no way. They're rigid. They're um, flexible. They're uncompromising. These kinds of things. Those traits do not make for a team player. And relationships require two people to be team players. So sometimes it can help to realize, um, that not all issues in relationships are communication problems. Sometimes it's realizing, oh my gosh, okay, no, this person, it's just nothing but power games with them. And I feel like I can never win, or not even win. I can't even get through to them. It's, you know, it, it's just exhausting. So those kinds of dynamics where it's a win lose, uh, they can't, there's no accountability on their end. There's no, uh, they kind of won't see their part in things. They won't take responsibility or accountability. Like, there's no working with that. So, okay, let me scroll down here. mm. Amy also says, yeah, once I realized he was using his children to hoover me, I was just so disgusted. The manipulation knew no bounds. I knew his style was abusive, period. Yes. That's a good way to look at it too. When you do see kind of those low moments and you do have those realizations of, wow, okay, like I knew there was some stuff going on here. I knew that we had some issues, but now I just realized you have no shame. Like there's no limits of what you consider appropriate or inappropriate behavior here, and you're willing to drag your children into it is yeah, like this isn't going to work. We're done here, kind of a thing. Um, I'll share with you in my experience, Amy. Just for those listening, and I know that we've got some new people on tonight. Kind of my realization with that, if you're, I don't know how familiar you are with my experience, but the uh, second, uh, just sociopathic, like pathological liar that I dated, this guy, um, it was kind of similar. He, oh God, it's just so wild. I had gotten pregnant, and which wasn't supposed to happen because he was supposedly infertile. Um, so, anyways, and then I miscarried. And I was right on time. I was just getting excited about having a baby. Everything was going great with us, blah, blah, blah. And anyways, everything ended because everything was a lie. It was just all a bunch of craziness. It was all a lie. Come to find out, no, he was still married. He'd moved with me across the country. I mean, it was just absolutely, like, absolutely wild. Anyways, his wife ends up calling me one night, and after he had moved back out to go back down with her, and I didn't know what had happened. He told me that um, that he basically he just missed being in this where we were from, and he needed to go back, blah blah. Whatever. Anyways, she calls me. Kind of long story short, we realize that then he was contacting me as well, and I didn't know that he went back to her. Um, I didn't even know she was still in the picture. Anyways, we start messaging back and forth, and then I come to realize, so he doesn't know this, and so he's feeding me the fantasy. Oh, you should come be back down here with me, and um, just all of this stuff, and using our miscarriage to try to like rope me in. How I'd never been so happy as I was with this, da da da. And it was just jaw dropping of, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that you could would use that, something so painful as um like, I don't know, as a it just was wild. It never ceases to amaze me, I guess. Anyways, okay. Let me scroll up here. I Speak My Truth says, how does breaking a trauma bond feel? I have moments where I crave my mom's abuse and the highs and lows of the adrenaline rush. Well, it feels like that. And I think for a lot of people, when that bond is breaking, it can feel so painful. It can feel like you're going to die. Like, I can't live without this person. And there's just this level of intensity. If you're able to see that as, okay, this is that part, this is like this wounded child in me. Um, you know, that's where that part's coming from. That, oh my gosh, I just can't survive without this relationship. I need this person more than I need air. That's really how it feels. Kind of bringing yourself into reality and reminding yourself of, okay, you know what? No, I can do this. My world is not going to end because this relationship ends, or if it's with a parent, if it ends, or if it changes forms or whatever, if I move out, I can handle it. I am an adult. If I need help handling it, there's resources out there, but um, yeah, it's that fear and that of, oh my gosh, kind of what's going to happen to me without this relationship. Uh, that tends to just come from a young part within ourselves, unless I don't want to minimize this, so this is why I'm bringing it up, but for a lot of people too, it can be that we've made that relationship our whole world. So in your case, it's a parent. So um, it's, parent child bond, which can be that feeling of, oh my gosh, what if I don't have my mother in my life, or in my life to this capacity, then kind of what will come of me. It's a little different with a relationship where it can, well, and I guess it depends on the dynamic with your mom too, but in relationships, especially with a controlling partner, or if there's a lot of codependency going on, where that we can make that other person our whole world, and then there's kind of some truth to that feeling of what will become of me, because everything is so intertwined in that relationship. you know there might be, finances are connected, and it's sort of like, well, if I leave, how am I going to afford to leave? Or there's some like legitimate logistical issues of, I don't know if I can survive without this relationship. And it can this is the benefit and value of kind of coming up with a safety plan. And when I say safety plan, I'm not talking about just in terms of danger. I'm talking about in terms of, what is the plan to leave, or what is a plan to leave. So again, kind of pouring it out of your head and onto paper can be really helpful, because it can help you identify, to work through all of that, of, okay, well, how would I go about this? Where would I go stay? And how would I get to work or to school if you don't have a vehicle? Or how would we separate certain finances? Or how would I be able to pay for certain bills, or all of that? You're kind of working through that, can at least, like, give you the clarity of, okay, there, you have options out there, and that you can do this. So, okay, so let me scroll up here. Mm. Changing My Life says, Dana, what do you do if your family was not abusive per se, but you had no autonomy or boundaries? And now that you've set boundaries, everyone is uncomfortable and avoiding you. It's just heartbreaking. Yeah, that's difficult. That's that's very common. So, there's that kind of metaphor of a relationship as like a dance between two people. And if and it's comfortable. We know, if we've been dancing this dance with this other person, we know how they move, we know the steps, we know, um, when this dance speeds up, when it slows down, like we're in sync with them. And when things change, the steps to the dance change, and it's awkward for everybody involved at first. Some people are able to adjust, other people are not. And, hopefully, hopefully over time, they'll be able to more readily adjust because they'll just realize, oh, okay, no, she said no. She's not gonna loan us money, or they're gonna have to be responsible for their own um, hurt feelings about things, because more often than not, if you've never been allowed boundaries or autonomy, which is very common with kind of domineering people, because it's all about them, right? It's them getting their way. Then there really isn't much of a relationship to begin with, because that relationship was only predicated upon them getting their way. And um, now that you've set boundaries and are carving out more autonomy, they don't know how to respond to that. So it's completely shaken up their world. Hopefully, in time, they'll get a little bit more in sync with that and just realize, oh, okay, well, I guess that's just what it is. But if they don't, um, then it's going to be kind of nursing your own hurt feelings about that, which is totally understandable, and kind of changing up, which family members you spend time with, or to what extent, kind of a thing. It's hard. It's really hard. That's one of the biggest challenges with major changes in a relationship. It's um, when those changes start to take place, because the domineering, controlling people out there, sometimes they're more conscious of it. Some of them are more conscious of their behavior than others. But if they're not conscious of it, then every time another person sets a boundary, it feels abusive to them. Like they feel like they're being punished, especially if it's gone on for a long time where nobody's told them no. They've always gotten their way, and now all of a sudden people are saying no, or you're saying no. So, uh, but again, that's not on you to, um, you know, try to make them okay with your boundaries. Um, you know, so okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yep, that's a good way to put it. Leanne says to Gemma about the breaking of a trauma bond. She says, when you withdraw from a narcissist, it's like a drug, and what you're feeling is normal. Yep. Yep. That's probably the best way to put it. It is. It feels like you're withdrawing from a drug, especially if you have made them a huge part of your life, especially if there have been those highs and lows. Kind of what we've been discussing for most of the night is about trauma bonds. And those trauma bonds, they're really intense bonds that are formed between two. They're formed as a result of the highs and lows of a tumultuous relationship. So it's that the lows are really low. It's the fear of loss. It's maybe or fear of punishment. It's silent treatment. It's getting hung up on. It's them kind of ghosting you. It's them threatening to leave. These kinds of things. It's the threat of loss, and then when things turn a corner, they respond to your phone calls. They show up on your door. They resurface, and it's that relief of, oh, okay, everything's going to be okay. And so it's the kind of the threat of loss, and the overwhelm and anxiety of the bad times, and the relief of the calm periods when things are okay. Those bonds are really deep. It's to think of it in another way, it's the difference between, it's kind of what makes, like, people that have gone to boot camp together. It's what makes boot camp so bonding versus being in a book club with somebody. If you're in a book club with them, there aren't really, well, I guess it depends on the book club, but there's generally not highs and lows. Whereas boot camp, you're being torn down, right? You're being kind of berated. It's this feeling of you're being pushed to your physical and your emotional limits every single day. And it creates this sense of camaraderie of all of the people. Same with med school, same with nursing school, same with um, there's a lot of uh, kind of traumatic, um, any type of like traumatic experience where it you're not sure if you're going to make it through, kind of a thing. That's that foundation for trauma bonds. It's really powerful, even on a more mild level. Um, it's the human brain is just fascinating. So even on a more mild level, it's a lot more bonding. Let's say you go on a date with somebody and you watch a scary movie together. You go watch a horror movie, that creates on some level that same trauma bond, even though it's not even happening to you. You're watching it on the screen, but it's that sense of, oh my gosh, is this person going to get away? Oh, thank goodness they made it. It's this feeling of we went through this together. You don't have that in a like a romantic comedy. If you go watch a romantic comedy or uh, a sci-fi movie, maybe generally. So it's powerful stuff, and that's why it's this. If you're interested in learning more about it, it's known as intermittent reinforcement, is where these highs and lows come from. And with abusive relationships in particular, they're not predictable. So in this the science experiment, when they were identifying intermittent reinforcement, they're basically giving I think it was giving a mouse a pellet, food, and the mouse would push the lever, a pellet would drop down, mouse was happy. That's um, you know um, kind of predictable, reliable reinforcement, right? Positive reinforcement. You do this one thing, you get this thing. It's variable, uh not very there's a term, I'm scrambling here. Like it's consistent. Um, Consistent reinforcement. If there's so anyways, so mouse would push the lever, food would come down, mouse would eat, mouse would be happy. But then they began changing it up. Mouse would push the lever. Sometimes food would come down, sometimes it wouldn't. And then when it wouldn't, then the mouse was confused. Like, well, wait a minute. This is what we're doing, right? Like I push the lever, you give me the food. And so then the mouse was confused, and then it would push the lever twice, and then three times, and then four times. And then it would start having this anxiety of, oh my gosh, what do I need to do in order to get the food? And people work in very much that same way. And what they've found with that level of intermittent reinforcement is it hooks people in, and it hooks animals in too, because we know that we're going to get rewarded, or there's a good chance that we're going to get rewarded. We just don't know when. Uh, Casinos have taken this concept and really run with it. Um, to a point, if you've been to Las Vegas in the past handful of years, you know it's absolutely wild now how much they're exploiting the psychology of people on so many levels. It's really wild. So, in terms of abusive relationships, it's that um, you want that person's love and attention. You push the lever, right? And if you get the love back, sort of like, oh, okay, this feels really good. Because it's that sense of, okay, I know how to navigate a relationship with this person. Right. It's kind of that foundation of being team oriented. Okay. Like I want to be able to get along with them. Um, because I care about them, and I want them to care about me, and um, that's kind of how we go about things, right? But then if one day you do the same thing that you do every day or every time, I don't know, let's say you give them, they walk in the door and you say, hi, honey. And then normally you're met with a hug and a kiss. And then this time you're met with a scowl, or all of a sudden they've become really icy and they're not talking to you, or something different happens. Then it's this kind of pangs of anxiety of, oh no, are they mad at me? What have I done? Um, what's going on? What's the problem? And this kind of mad scramble to make things okay, to resolve things. But if you have somebody, which on the surface doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal or that big of a problem, but if you have somebody who runs hot and cold and who or who enjoys kind of, it makes them feel superior or significant or important to watch another person, you twist in the wind, bending over backwards, texting them multiple times, calling them multiple times. I'll do anything to make this work. If you've got somebody with a real sadistic bend, then it really becomes um, just absolutely devastating and destructive. It's not uncommon for people to come to these live streams, and they'll share stories of or experiences of their partner, who won't be accountable for anything that they've done, and will tell them, uh, like, let's say they caught their partner cheating, and then their partner spins the issue into, oh, what, you were checking up on me, and now I can't. How do I know if I can trust you? Like, I clearly can't trust you because you're snooping on me and all this, and so um, and then let's say the person cheating, breaks up with them, and so now that the person that was cheated on is just absolutely beside themselves. They're like, I feel like I'm being punished. I'm just devastated. I just found out my partner's cheating, and they're upset with me, and they left. And so their head is just spinning, their emotions are spinning. And then let's say their partner comes back a few days later and is like, you know what? I've thought about it. I will forgive you for what you've done. And if that person's, you know, um, kind of been on those series of highs and lows, and if they're um, if they're not aware, I guess, that they're being manipulated, and if they're struggling in a lot of different areas, but self-esteem is one of them, um, to realize, okay, I'm not going to do this. Like, this isn't healthy. I'm not going to tolerate being treated like this. If if they go back, then the challenge now is their relationship has hit a new low, and that new low tends to become the new normal. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Monica asks, Dana, do you think that some people are just not fated for love? That's an interesting question. And I guess the sticking point I'm having with it is some of the wording that you're using. I don't believe in fate. So I don't think that fate is a factor in that. I think that some people's behavior is so destructive that until they can get that figured out, then they will not have uh, health, what we would refer to as like love, but I'll say healthy love. They won't have healthy love. They'll have things that they confuse for love. Um, they'll if and that's kind of like the saying goes, like, if we don't love ourselves, it's really hard for us to love somebody else, if not impossible. And the reason being is, if we don't know how to love ourselves, if we don't know how to love ourselves, and we probably don't know what love is, and we don't know how to express it. And if we don't know how to express it to ourselves, then we don't have that standard in our life. If we don't have that standard in our life, then it's impossible for us to have boundaries, because boundaries are the bodyguards to our standards. So if we don't have that standard of, this is how I expect to be treated, like with dignity and respect to start. If we don't have that, then we don't have the boundaries that can back that up, and that are going to act as the bodyguards, the bouncers, and end situations that are destructive to us. So I do believe that for the vast majority of people out there, these skills, basically the skill of self-love, can be learned. But I also it's a prerequisite to being in a healthy relationship. I don't think that there is such a thing as a healthy relationship without self-love. It's um it's just not going to end well. Resentment, at a minimum, resentment is going to be building up. So, and expectations of the other person are going to be probably unreasonable. Um, in terms of like narcissists and sociopaths and those of that ilk, uh, it's kind of the same. Like I don't, I again, I'm not a fan of using the word like, do I think that they're just not fated for love? But it's not, the healthy love isn't possible if a person's coming from an unhealthy place. But that's that thing is there's so many words surrounding like this concept of love, including the word love itself, that are kind of misused or misconstrued. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion is. So I guess let me back up a little bit. Like let's talk about what love is and what love isn't. So love is, I'm a big fan of the kind of definition that, love is a verb. Love is a series of actions. It's treating another person with dignity, with respect, with appreciation, with care, with concern, with um, kind of wanting, um, nurturing, um, wanting kind of what's best for them, and um, versus what I think often gets misconstrued as love, which tends to be that deep sense of kind of unhinged, I need this person as much as I need air, um, infatuation, lust. I gotta have it now. This person, if I don't have them, then kind of that Romeo and Juliet. Like I've known you for 3 days, I'm willing to do anything for you, kind of thing. Like that's not love. That's infatuation. So there's a difference. So um, yeah, in order to have it's like I said, it's just really difficult, if not impossible, for a person to truly love someone else if they don't love themselves. Because if we don't love ourselves, then we're coming into a relationship with a bunch of unmet needs that more likely than not, we're looking for somebody else to meet. It's, I don't feel attractive. I don't feel, or I'm sad, or I'm um, lonely, or I'm coming to this other person with all of these empty buckets looking for them to fill them because I don't know how to meet my own needs, because I don't know how to love myself. Like I don't know how to be loving towards myself, kind of a thing. So when we're able, and I'm not saying that a person has to do this perfectly, like it's, we're all like, you know, uh, we know we do different when we know different, and it's kind of this ever evolving process. But when we're able to make peace with ourselves, and we're able to, when we have a life that we love, and that um, and there's that certain level of contentment there, then we're not approaching other people in friendships or in relationships from that place of scarcity and lack of, okay, well, you'll just be my best friend, or okay, well, we'll just get married. There's not this sense of urgency or desperation, or um, kind of all-consuming thing. It's sort of like, okay, um, I know how to, I value myself, and I value my time and my energy and my environment and all of these things. And I want to kind of move things slow and see this person and see if they're a good fit. And then, um, you know, and they're doing hopefully the same thing, and kind of working towards, treating each other with love, and realizing that those intense feelings of infatuation, all like that's great, those are fun, and for some people they last, but I think for the vast majority of people, they don't, they tend to kind of simmer down. They can be rekindled with time and energy and work, but um, mainly time, making time for that to rekindle. But um, if it's but I think for people that have experienced love at such a deep level, like that deep level of appreciation and enjoyment of another human being, um, that infatuation stuff, like that's fun. Um, but it's almost like you look forward to that simmering down so you can start to see the person and the relationship more clear. So you can see it clearly instead of kind of through those rose colored glasses. Does that, and that was a long answer. Does that answer any what you're asking? Okay. I speak my truth says, I work a job and I don't believe I can take care of myself or survive without my mom. But I swear to God, I will lock myself in a bathroom, whatever it takes to break this bond. I just will do whatever. Okay, so one of the things that can help in your situation is if there's that disconnect between thought and between reality and fear. Okay. So if there's this, or feelings between feelings and reality, if you're feeling like I can't survive without my mom, but the reality is, and I mean, I don't know how many hours you work, I don't know how much you make, like, but if the reality is, no, actually you can, then getting your brain to see that is going to take some doing. So one of the ways um, that you can do this is to, let's say, write it down on paper, a budget of, okay, these are the expenses, this is my income. Put it on paper. Can you actually survive on your own if you were to move out? Then you'll have clarity. If there's uh, at a minimum, you know that you can survive financially, so at least that, hopefully that piece of the puzzle is resolved. um, if if the feeling is I can't survive emotionally without my mom, then that's something else. I frankly, it's kind of a similar process of, okay, well, what emotional needs am I getting met from my mom? And um, and then I would also encourage you to build up your support system. So if your mom is the only person that's eh, like, if you really don't have anybody else in your life except for your mom, that's part of where that is most likely where a lot of that fear is coming from of, I can't emotionally make it on my own. I'll have no one. If there's truth to that, if your mom is the only person in your life, then I would encourage, that's some time well spent now, is to start cultivating your support system. Um, Either rekindling former friendships, extending, kind of cultivating new friendships with people that you work with, um, you know, kind of going to meetup groups, meetup.com. I think there's still quite a few groups that are online because of COVID and stuff, but doing these kinds of things to cultivate that. So, yeah, I guess kind of getting clear. Where's the divide here? Like what is fact? What is feeling? Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. And Nalania says, I don't know what love feels like. Well, in my opinion, well, okay, let me just back up. Love is one of those concepts that how it's portrayed, I think our first understandings of love, it starts off problematic. Movies, music, TV, what we see about love it's not love. Oftentimes it's really toxic, abusive dynamics. Um, it's uh, really unhealthy, codependent type dynamics. It's at a minimum, it's infatuation, and it's fairy tales. It's fairy tales for little kids, and then it's fairy tales for adults. A lot of romantic comedies are just fairy tales for adults, and um, that kind of stuff. It's problematic in the sense that people can get confused about what love actually is. So, in my book, my opinion, love is well, actually, probably better said. There's a saying in Buddhism that um, something along the lines of the person that your heart beats fast for, that you're losing sleep, that you're feeling anxious, that you feel like you can't live without them. Um, that person, that's not love. Love is it's a feeling of calmness, contentment, safety, trust. Mm, It's a sense of ease. It's a sense of appreciation. It's a sense of nourishment. It's deeper than that kind of unhinged, unbridled, um, infatuation that happens early on. And I think true love, it takes time to cultivate that. There's that love because it takes time to get to know a person for who they are, and it takes experiences. I mean, it takes experiences, not just time. It takes experiences to get to know another person for who they are, and um, to be able to you know to kind of get in sync with that other person, if it's a healthy thing for us. Um, and you know just you get to kind of see, I guess, when I think of love in uh, in like a non-romantic sense, I think about kids. If you've ever had a child or a family member um, that you just have thought the world of, or you just love them so completely, and it's just this sense of wonderment, of, oh my gosh, I just think you're so awesome, and it's such a joy to just watch you bloom. Like, as a human being, like, I just, that doesn't mean, like, of course you get frustrated, you get upset. Like, if you're around them for any length of time, they're human, you're human. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it's overall, it's that feeling of, I honor your uniqueness, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I get to experience this. It's kind of that level of appreciation. So I don't know. It's my 2 cents. Um, okay. Gypsy Soul has a question. So let me scroll up and see if I can find it. I put the, I paused the chat, Gypsy, when I am talking, and then I lose my place. Um, let me scroll up here. Sorry, I'm still looking for it. Hmm. Let's see. I don't see it. If you could repost it, that would be great. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what happened here. Aussie says, Hi, Dana. I'm a mother of a victim. I do things to protect her, such as buy things she needs fix things so he doesn't know, etc. I'm scared for her that the alienation is coming soon. Well, yeah, I alienation from him, I'm guessing. It's it's got to be challenging to be a mother and to watch your child go through this time and time and time again. And um, yeah, yeah, that's got to be really difficult to watch. I'm sure as you've kind of come to realize that uh, oftentimes saying something can make it worse. And um, there, I frankly, I would, if she's open, it's, yeah, her, your daughter, if she's open to popping in on some of these live streams, that can be really helpful. I think it's helpful to hear from other people that have been there, done that, because then it doesn't feel, um, it kind of decreases that level of defensiveness. It's sort of like, oh, okay, these other people here, they don't have, um, it's not like they just don't like my partner. It kind of gets rid of it cuts through a lot of the excuses they might have, or the defenses they might have for kind of what's going on, or whatnot. Um, so that might be a thought. Um, Also, just kind of FYI, most domestic violence agencies offer free counseling. So that might be something that you want to talk to her about and say, uh, you don't need to, oftentimes, you don't need to be in a shelter. It doesn't necessarily need to be physical abuse. There's no pressure, but it can be nice, and it's anonymous. So she can, um, he doesn't need to know. Nobody needs to know. Um, so that might be a thought. If you're feeling like, she's struggling, I feel like she doesn't have, or she could really use some extra support, that might be a resource for her as well. Um, okay, let me see. Let me scroll down here. Oh, okay. Thank you. Helpful mom found it. Gypsy's Soul's question says the narcissist often insults them. They want to know if the insults the narcissist uses are true or not. Well, I, I, that's, I mean, that's a question that I think you would have to answer, Gypsy. Um, Sometimes they make up complete lies. Sometimes what they say has a kernel of truth to it. It just depends on the situation. With that said, even if there is a kernel of truth in something that somebody heard, something that somebody says, it doesn't make it okay for them to say it in a hateful, destructive way. So, and it can, I think that's the hardest part with emotional and psychological abuse like that is it's because it's bullying. It's being on the receiving end of this barrage of insults that are designed to to not only tear somebody down, but oftentimes to try to destroy them emotionally. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do is to keep your hurt feelings and your self-worth in two separate buckets. So if somebody says something that's really hateful or hurtful, it goes in that hurt feelings bucket. It doesn't have to spill over into the self-worth bucket or the self-esteem bucket. So trying to visualize, okay, you know what? Somebody said something really mean. Man, that hurts. And um, I have my feelings are hurt because they said something hurtful. And but we don't need to further internalize it to be like, you know what? Um, they're absolutely right. They're or uh, we don't have to let it decrease our self-esteem or our self-worth. This takes some practice. It's very difficult when especially if you've been getting torn down over a long period of time. But let me give you an example of the difference. So let's say if somebody were to tell me, "Oh God, you stupid, you um, God, you're so gross. Like you've gained so much weight. That's just so disgusting. Um, you know, you're just, that's just, I don't know. I'm trying to think. You gain so much weight. That's just terrible. You're good for nothing. Um, I can't believe that you advise anybody, give anybody life advice. I mean, who would take a life advice from you? Right? Ouch. Like, how bad would that sting? Is there truth in that? Truth is, yeah, you know what? I have gained some weight over the past couple years, but that's where that truth ends. Do I believe that, I'm kind of no good, or that I'm a terrible person, or that, kind of the rest of the horrible things that they said? No, I don't. So I don't need to let even though I'm not letting any of that in, even what's truthful, like I'm not absorbing that and letting that into my self-esteem bucket, it's all still hurtful. Even if that's true, like having somebody point out to you, "Oh wow, yeah, you've gained weight." That hurts. Even if it's true, it still hurts if it's something that we're sensitive about. Um, but it doesn't have to spill over. I don't have to take and I would encourage anybody listening to not take hateful or hurtful words as um, truth as to who you are, because I just don't think that that's accurate. So, and I hope that you don't either. Um, so you can hold on to what helps uh, if somebody's being hateful or hurtful. Like if somebody, like I said, you need to you gain all this weight, blah blah blah. If I take any part of that as helpful, which I don't know, it might motivate me a little bit to go to the gym, but even still, that's not the way I want to be motivated. I don't want to be verbally abused to get motivated. Because I won't stay motivated. It's just gonna it's not what I don't need that energy in my life. Um, but if somebody says something, then there's a kernel of truth, but it's wrapped up in a really painful package. You can hang on to what helps and let the rest go. At a minimum, you definitely don't have to absorb it and make it part of who you are. So keep in mind what people say to other people. It's truly a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you. Happy, healthy, normal, well-adjusted people don't walk around trying to destroy other people. It's sort of like if you see another person that's gossiping, and they're like, "Oh, did you know that da, 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 that Susan in accounting, she did this, and oh, she's just, oh my gosh, and did you see that new lipstick she's wearing? What is she trying to pull? Blah 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 blah." All of that kind of gossiping and stuff. People that do stuff like that, they tend to some people it's entertaining, but to other people, they're like, wow, no, don't want that energy in my life, or like that person can't be trusted, because odds are the moment I walk away, they're going to start talking about me like that too. So while they might think they've got some juicy gossip on Susan in accounting, they're really just making themselves look bad. They're not making Susan look bad. So if somebody's going around talking a bunch of junk about you, it's not making you look bad, it's making them look bad. So, yeah, there's a lot of power in realizing that we don't have to internalize everything that another person says, especially if it's insults hurled at us. It's sort of like if you can imagine or visualize, I don't know, just um, kind of a bully of a kid who's throwing rocks at your house windows. You know, we don't have to keep getting pelted by rocks. Like we can close the windows or we can close the shutters, and we can't prevent this other person from throwing rocks necessarily, but we don't have to, we can do our best to um, not let that stuff in. Again, it's easier said than done, but it can be done. Okay, so let's see here. I Speak My Truth says, I'm so isolated. I have no friends and I'm so angry and I'm so sad. I would strongly encourage you, I Speak My Truth, to reach out to either your local domestic violence agency, um, or if you have like a 4-year university near you that has a counseling program, a social work program, psychology program. Oftentimes they'll have counseling centers on campus that are free to the public, where um, the trade-off is that you're working with the student, um, but it's going to be a great resource for free counseling, and that can really help to just um, yeah, to to increase your support system. Jennifer says, my dad would be critical to the point where it bothered my mom badly, but my grandpa and uncle are the same way. My dad would justify it by saying it was constructive criticism, but you could tell it wasn't. There was just something off about it. Okay, so that's a good example. And here's the thing is, even if it truly was constructive, if it's unwanted, it's unwanted. And so then it becomes a boundary violation of now you're just going around giving unwanted advice, right? Except it's not even advice, it's just criticism. Like, I didn't ask you on how I can improve in some way, shape, or form. I no, I don't. It's not welcome. Please stop doing it. And if that person continues, then it's like, okay, now this is getting to be bullying. It's obnoxious. It's obnoxious. They wouldn't like it if you were to walk around and be like, hey, you know what? Let me micromanage your life. I'm just going to keep telling you, give you all sorts of constructive criticism that you didn't ask for. And if you tell me to stop, I'm just going to say, oh, what? I'm just trying to help. It's like, no, well, it's backfiring because you're giving me a bunch of unwanted help. It's micromanaging. And oftentimes, uh, constructive criticism, um, it can if there's bite to it, it's sort of like a, you know um yeah, it's a kind of insult, cloaked and constructive compliment, but it's not it's an insult. So yeah, that's a good example of a more kind of, on the surface it seems like a subtle thing, or maybe even somebody might doubt themselves and say like, well, okay, but is there something wrong with me? I mean, this person's giving me constructive criticism. Like, is it my issue? I just can't handle constructive criticism. Is it my ego that's just too sensitive? And the reality is, we all have no, like we all have our limits. It's okay to have our boundaries are gonna can and do. They change every single moment of every single day. Everybody's do. So this is why it's so important for us to communicate them, and why relationship for a relationship to work, it requires both people to be able to communicate that and then respect the answer. So if a person's receptive to constructive criticism. I don't know. They cook a meal, and here's the thing. Again, a lot of it's asked for, or at a minimum, saying asking a person, "Do you mind if I give you some constructive criticism?" And then if they say no, being like, Okay, drop it." Because again, it, it's only constructive criticism if it's helpful and if it's wanted. If it's unhelpful, if it's rude and or unwanted, then it's just kind of bullying. So at a minimum, it's controlling. It's not okay. Okay, good. Gypsy Soul says that helps more than you know. Thank you so much. Okay, and I'm glad. And just kind of to circle back around to your question, just some of what they say have truth in it. Oftentimes with abusive people, what because it's that domination driven mindset that we were talking about earlier. So domination driven mindset, it's the win lose, and they tend to see any type of argument, uh, disagreement, ending of a relationship. They take that as such an insult to their ego, that it creates this need to like lash out. And instead of kind of being more mature about it, it's sort of like, you know what? I'm hurt by this. Even if like you didn't do anything, like let's say you caught them cheating, right? Um, and I don't know, you in the relationship, they're so offended and so upset, like, how dare you break up with me? Kind of, I mean, it can be outrageous. Or they shove you when you fall down a flight of stairs and the cops show up and they go to jail and that's somehow your fault. Um, it's kind of that lack of accountability. Anyways, but that win-lose mindset that they tend to have, it's exactly that. And so when they go into attack mode, they'll tend to start they go for the jugular. So they're going to go again more often than everybody's different, but more often than not, they're going to go for those topics that are very near and dear to you. So let's say, for example, you just started playing the piano, or your child, your 7-year-old is having trouble in school. These kinds of things. They're going to hone in on that. And oh, well, no wonder your child's having trouble at school. Anybody would if they had a mom like you, like cutting deep, deep, kind of hitting below the belt kind of things, where like that's not even true. They're saying things in order to inflict maximum pain. Or, oh, you just started playing the piano after 20 years, when your mother told you that you were a terrible piano player and to give it up, but that's always been your life dream. You started playing again, and then they tell you, no, you've absolutely got no talent. Um, you should just sell the piano or give it away to somebody else. Just kick, kicking out that chair from underneath the person. Really common. So, uh, and kind of what we were talking about earlier is people that have that domination driven mindset, there's oftentimes there's no end to it, where we think, okay, surely this one thing must be sacred. Like they would never bring their kids into it, or they would never, bring up, I don't know, my friend's suicide, or they would never do that. Oh, yeah, yeah, they would. So, or at least it's not uncommon for them to take such, you know, deep hits like that. Um, okay. Oh, she said yes, he blamed me for going to jail for the abuse. Yeah. That's that's very common. So, and that shows that lack of accountability and that lack of responsibility. And if when you're in the thick of it, it can be confusing. As um, a lot of targets of abuse are like, um, well, let's say for example, okay, this you get in a big fight and um, they punch the wall, and that frightens you, and then I don't know, like you slip and fall, and um, I don't know, I don't know, they do something, and things escalate quickly, and they're like, well, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't hit you. I just hit the wall, and you slipped and fell, and I don't know, you broke your wrist or something. And so on for a person that for a target of abuse, it can be confusing, like, well, okay, I mean, they didn't break my wrist, but it's like, no, but they didn't have to. Or there was one situation this one time, a guy had shoved his soon to be ex-wife, and the way he told it was, no, I was, I just kind of, I pushed her up against the wall, because she was uh, she was yelling and screaming at me and all this stuff, and then she ended up um, like basically, like, she ended up being overly dramatic, and she threw herself down the stairs. And the reality was, no, he'd shoved her maybe harder than he intended, but the result was she still fell down the stairs, and that's still domestic violence. That's why you don't touch people. That's why you don't um using intimidation, using fear, all of that kind of stuff, it escalates, and it's all considered domestic violence. So uh, but I think there's a lot of confusion about that, because we have this idea of what domestic violence tends to be, or what it tends to look like, and that's kind of only in extreme situations does it actually match that idea of what people have in their head. More often than not, it's not so um, it's not so clear cut. And so that's why it's confusing. It's sort of like, well, okay, this person, he came home, and I forgot to buy milk at the store, and he starts cussing me out. Well, I guess it's my fault, right? If I hadn't forgotten to buy milk, then he wouldn't have yelled at me. I'll just do better next time. Or, it's my fault. I shouldn't have brought up politics. I shouldn't have brought up politics at dinner. That's what set him off. And so next time I just need to know, like, to not do that. Or, I confronted her. She'd been drinking. I knew I shouldn't have done that. And it's my fault. She's a hothead when she drinks. It's my fault. Like, these kinds of things. It can create a lot of confusion, but at the end of the day, a person's responsible for their behavior. It's okay for a person to get angry or frustrated. That's human emotions. It's not okay for them to then take it out on another person. This is where it can be very difficult um, for both people involved in a relationship, because abusive relationships are oftentimes crazy making relationships. And this is another reason things can start getting really heated between both people involved. So, um, and it's, oh boy, yeah, it can be a lot, but at the end of the day, it's, the law tends to look at our behavior as a reflection of, like, we're responsible for our behavior. And, um, you know, so no, like, if there was abuse and your ex went to jail for abuse, it's his abusive behavior that put him in jail, not the neighbors, not you. It's not the police. It's not any of that. It's his behavior put him in jail. Yeah. Ellen says there's always an excuse and seldom admitting it was their actions. Yeah. And if you do get some sort of admission, it's generally for show. It's for court, it's for the judge, it's to get you back because they want a second or a 20-second chance. It's all kinds of things. But um very rarely I think is it truly sincere. Let's see. Okay, interesting point. I'm only catching snippets of this, but Huffle Mom makes the comment, there are times when screaming and crying are necessary things. Childbirth is a good non-trauma related example of this. Yeah. And again, I'm missing part of the context. There's a time and place for all emotions, right? And yeah, childbirth is definitely one of them. Um, and who was it? Where's Refiner Morgan made the comment. She says, I disagree with childbirth being non-trauma. It can be a very real physical trauma. And that's a very valid point. Um, and maybe something kind of worth touching on is that's the thing with trauma is it varies from person to person. And there's so many experiences out there that are like, okay, well, that's within the realm of what we would maybe consider a kind of a, quote unquote, like normal human experience, childbirth. A lot of people have kids, right? It's not something that's completely out of left field that we would consider traumatic, like being held hostage or even being in an abusive relationship. Um, but there's, definitely um, these kinds of situations, no matter how commonplace they are, they can be traumatic. In all fairness, I don't think Huffle Mom was, um, yeah, talking about. I think she's just kind of talking about like the even said I don't want to say run of the mill, but um, a non-traumatic childbirth where kind of everything's going as expected and maybe as planned. Um, but yeah, sometimes if it's a person's first child, or if things all of a sudden go off track and it can start becoming very traumatic and very quickly. So the reason I kind of wanted to elaborate on that is because we were talking about earlier, there's so many different ways that we get messages from society or even from ourselves about how we should or shouldn't feel, whether or not something is or isn't a problem. And trauma is one of those things. I can't tell you how many times I hear from people, oh, well, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Um, you know, uh, um, this happens all the time. Other people have it worse, or I've lived worse. Um, I feel like I should be over it by now. All of that's just, it's minimizing. And the reality is like, you feel how you feel. And if it was traumatic to you, then it's traumatic, you know? So um, I think it's just helpful because most people, when they think in terms of trauma or especially PTSD, they tend to think in terms of things that are really extreme, like going to war, and not just war, but being in active combat. And that's only one way that a person can develop PTSD. Um, medical trauma is a thing, car accidents, abusive relationships, house fire. Um, Gosh, you needed it. you name it, it can happen. Thank you, Bear, for the live stream donation. And he says, 8 years ago, I absolutely needed this channel. I promise you, the other side of healing joy awaits. Oh, well, thank you. I love that. The other side of healing joy awaits. Yes, that's good words to remember, that there is life after this, and that life after this doesn't have to be a diminished life. It doesn't mean that you have to go around and somehow become okay with feeling profoundly broken. And it doesn't mean that you have to be profoundly broken. That you really can, and I've talked about this a lot, but kind of the upside of rock bottom is you get to decide which pieces you're going to rebuild with. And that's incredibly powerful. And you can rebuild your life in such a way that it's even better than it ever was before. So I guess for those of you that are kind of fresh out on this path of healing, I guess just kind of know that, um, move in that direction of what nourishes you for the long run. And realize, that that there's so much that is good and right with you. And if you've had an abusive person in your life who, um, has just done a ton of hateful, hurtful things, realizing that that's a reflection of them, that it's not a reflection of you. Happy, healthy, well-adjusted people don't go around treating other people like garbage. And that kind of behavior, it didn't start with you and it's not going to end with you. And that's unfortunate that they're going to continue to go through life like that, but and those around them are going to suffer from it. But I guess just please know that it's not you. It's not you. You didn't deserve it. You didn't cause it. Um, you can't, um, but we can't cure them. We can't fix them. It's up to them. And all we can do is set boundaries. So Ellen asks, she says, Dana, I'm really struggling with wanting to make contact with several women I'm sure he's cheated with and discarded them. I know all the reasons not to, but it's tugging at my gut. Well, I guess kind of getting clear with yourself on what is the clarity that you're seeking from contacting them. Like, if, let's just say, if it went perfectly, like what kind of outcome are you looking for? Is it validation? Is it, um, what, I guess, what are you hoping to hear from them? And then asking yourself, okay, can I get that validation? Do I already have that validation in some other way, shape, or form? And, um, and then if not, also, I guess, kind of realizing if you do talk to them, you might get some of the validation that you're seeking, but you might also get a lot more details that might not be as helpful as you think they might be. But I mean, with that said, um, if he's out of your life and they're out of his life, um, I mean, you could. I'm not necessarily opposed to people reaching out unless you feel like it's going to put you in harm's way or something. But if it's not, I mean, there's a solid chance that they won't message you back. Um, but sometimes they do, and sometimes it is that level of, kind of getting more painful answers that you need. Yeah, it's up to you. I guess I would just encourage you to kind of have your emotional shields up if you do contact them, and then realize that whatever he said to you, whatever he said about them to you and about you to them is not true. So kind of just prepare yourself for that. And then thinking, okay, well, what would I do if I were to talk to these other women? If they were to respond to my messages, if we were to, whatever it might be, like, how are you going to handle, what's the plan for handling that anger that surfaces? And I'd come up with a plan for that, and some self-care surrounding that, whatever that might look like, calling some friends, if you have a therapist, um, some way to just process that, because it really can have a way of bringing up a lot of stuff that you feelings that you thought were kind of long um, simmered down, and can put you right back in that moment. So yeah, just some thoughts. Oh, well, thank you, Leanne. She says, I just wanted to donate and say thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Milk Dud says, my dad has poor communication skills. It's been suggested that I be more inquisitive when speaking with him. Any suggestions on how I could communicate this way? Well, since I don't know what kind of poor communication skills he has, the suggestion that comes to mind would be, at a minimum, to ask what's known as open-ended questions. So a closed question is one that can be answered in yes or no. Um, that open-ended is open. So for example, it's the difference between, hey, did you have a good day? Yes or no answer, versus, hey, how was your day today? Now, granted, somebody could always say fine and leave it at that, but um, it's not such a cut and dry answer. Um, so kind of open, yeah, asking more open-ended questions. Uh, Depends what you guys normally talk about. You can search effective communication skills. That can be helpful. Um, it so depends. It depends on the kind of relationship you have with your dad. If he's just kind of a man of few words, but you have a good relationship there, or that you think he'd be open to having a relationship of more depth, he just is not much of a conversationalist, then it can help when you do talk to him, to ask him questions, um, to come from a place of curiosity. So instead of saying, um, let's say following up with. So if you were to ask him, you're sitting around the dinner table and you say, uh, hey, Dad, how was your day? And he says, fine. That's it. Then ask something like, what was the high point of your day today? And something that kind of gets him thinking. Um, so kind of coming from that place of curiosity, and asking questions, and then follow-up questions, and then follow-up questions to that, to kind of get a person talking. Um, yeah, that's one approach. But again, your mileage may vary. I'm not sure the relationship. Oh, well, thanks, Huffle Mom. She says, for the live stream donation, she says, Dana, thanks for doing this every week. I find it very comforting, and I know I'm not the only one. Well, I appreciate it. I know you know, it's been rough. I appreciate everything that you and Jack and the other mods do. Like, that's really, really helpful. So I appreciate you showing up every single week, and um, Jack for trying to for trying to organize me with videos and live streams and everything. I know that's like herding cats for him, and I appreciate you both. Oh, Let's see. Let's see. Let me scroll up. That's another good question. Jennifer said, she says you could ask, well, what did you do today? One of my favorite questions with kids is, well, with people in general, but kids tend to go with this more so than adults right out of the gate, is asking them, well, what was the high point of your day today? And then what was the low point of your day today? And it's amazing what you can, and then having everybody answer that um, around the dinner table or whenever can, it's amazing that what the things that you can learn about a person just asking those two questions. It's really very connecting. Oh, well, thank you, Stephanie, for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. Monica says, I got bullied all my life, and then I realized it was because I was getting bullied at home. Mm, yes. I think that is a realization that a lot of us kind of tend to have at some point in our healing of, oh my gosh, like changing my life. Was saying earlier, she was never allowed to have autonomy or boundaries. And when when that happens, if we've grown up with either being bullied or we've grown up with some, we'll say, people with very strong personalities, and we weren't allowed to have boundaries, then as a result, the older we get, um, we're going to we're going to have problems in life if we've never been taught the importance of being able to say no. And and also then the other result of that is over time we start turning down the volume on those feelings. So all of those feelings of, ooh, I'm not comfortable with that, or oh, I don't like that, or that's not okay with me, or all of that, we turn the volume down and we start thinking and telling ourselves, I must be the one with the problem because nobody else seems to think this is a problem, right? Everybody else is telling me, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Uh, that's just how they are. Well, there's lots of good about them. Focus on the positive. All of people are, nobody seems to think that what I'm experiencing is a problem. And so if we're looking to other people to validate our experience instead of looking within, then it's very for us to get knocked off course and to think, um, okay, then I must be misinterpreting the situation. And so therefore, as a solution, I just need to get better at being mistreated. I just need to get better at tolerating their behavior because that's just how they are. Instead of realizing that might be how they are, but that doesn't mean that I just need to sit here and take it. Like I need to figure out some boundaries to where if I'm going to be, well, if I'm going to be around people in general, but if especially around boundary pushing people, that um, am able to maintain my sense of autonomy and kind of peace in my life to where they're not just steamrolling over me. So for a lot of us, these kinds of relationships tend to open that door and we realize, oh my gosh, I I thought I had pretty decent boundaries. I mean, I thought I was doing a pretty decent job. And then we realize, oh my gosh, no, okay, um, and this isn't always the case, but this is the case for a lot of people of, okay, yeah, I can trace this back. This is why this was happening. Um, I didn't see it that way at the time, but now it makes a lot of sense of I was getting into these relationships. I'll tell you from personal experience, I couldn't figure it out. Like why this is, by the second one, it was like, okay, this isn't just a fluke coincidence, or situation. Now it's a pattern. So what am I missing here? And it was the realization of I was mistaking, um, a lot of things. I was mistaking controlling behavior for caring. I was mistaking love bombing for love. I was mistaking intensity for sincerity. I was mistaking all kinds of things. And so, I think, like most people, you can kind of see the snake in the street. That's, relatively easy to avoid. It's the snake in the grass that gets you. And so I was getting tangled up with all these people that were very quick to make me their whole world. And I was very quick to to make them my whole world. And that was that unexamined codependency on my end that I didn't realize that that was a problem. I mean, I just had so many dysfunctional messages in my brain about relationships and love and friendships and commitment and you name it. Oh, Jack says more like herding lolcats. I will still resend you the playlist links, mostly because the old message doesn't have the 2021 playlist link. Oh, thank you. And thank you for the live stream donation. And you guys rock. Much appreciated. Speaking of playlist links, book club is tomorrow. Tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I forget the name of the book, but I will have it for you tomorrow. It's a book on Kaizen, which is kind of like the art or the Japanese art of um, the power of making small changes. I know it sounds like a completely unrelated book, and I guess in many ways it is, but I think it's helpful for kind of getting out of overwhelm and moving forward and making positive changes. So you can join for that discussion tomorrow night. If you want like to be notified when I go live for book club or whenever I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And yeah, I send a text message about 5-10 minutes before I go live. Let's see. Changing my life says, yeah, you find yourself writing the book on how to work around them rather than doing the setting boundaries. Yep. You know, that was another big aha moment for me. It was just so weird. Um, all these different levels of awareness. It reminds me, if you guys have ever seen that movie, the 80s movie, The Never Ending Story, and the little boy, he has the book, The Never Ending Story, and he ditches school and he's up in like the attic, I think, of the school, reading the book. And, there's this lightning flashing outside and this heavy storm, and he's reading by flashlight this book. And he starts realizing like the book is describing him. And it's that realization of what? Like this can't be. And he shuts the book and then he kind of opens it again. It's like, what? And he's reading it and he's like, this is just so weird. It's describing him. Uh, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but yeah, I know for me when I was in different support groups and kind of reading certain books about things, and I was like, what? I feel like these people are telling by say, but we have the same story. Like, are they talking about me? How do they know my life? Like, this is so weird. And yeah, it's really bizarre when you realize that changing my life. So that's a good example of um, when you kind of realize, oh my gosh, I have developed that skill of getting really good at walking on eggshells and knowing how to work around difficult people rather than to actually set boundaries with them. And um, there's some of us, again, myself included, where that skill set became so good that it was a big part of our profession, or why we got into certain professions. Um, I'd been in caregiving fields for my whole life, and um, it was, you know, and I was a nurse for a good chunk of that time, and so it was before I became a therapist, and it was this. this feeling of, oh yeah, no, I'm really good at walking on eggshells and de-escalating situations. Like I have that skill down. And then not realizing, wait, how did I get so good at this? And is this a problem? And do I do this in other areas of my life? That's another thing that's really wild to realize. Like we kind of have maybe this one relationship that just kind of breaks us, that leads us to find a support group or find help. But then over time, we're, it's like those maps on them, those crime shows where they have like the red string, and the push pins, and they're like making all these connections. And you're like, don't you see it? Don't you see it? Like it just kind of goes everywhere. And you're like, I get how I got here. This makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. That's a really valid point. Monica says, it's just so strange that I went through half my life not knowing I was getting abused just because I was not being hit. That's a big one. And that goes back to this idea of that, we all have this idea of what things are, right? And so we have this idea of what abuse is. And for a lot of people, it's that stereotypical abuse. It's what you see on posters, right? Like in the high school gym, or pamphlets at the doctor's office or whatever. And it tends to be a woman with a black eye huddled in the corner, and maybe like a shadow of a very intimidating man in the doorway. Well, okay, that's one way that it can look like, but that's not how these things normally go down. That, like I said, that's those kind of stereotypical cases. Those are more the exception than they are the norm. And so the downside to that is, as a result, people really do struggle to identify that they're being abused. Um, Even physical abuse. They might be getting hit, but it's sort of like, well, but they weren't hitting me in the face. He or she would just play really rough with me, or they would just pinch, or they would leave bruises where nobody could see, or um, they didn't mean it. They were just roughhousing. There's so many different ways that kind of stuff can be minimized, um, by us and by other people. And it's very eye-opening, um, when we start realizing, okay, no, there's other forms of abuse. And I think kind of the power in that is, if you think back to those times that you were experiencing some form of abuse, it it didn't sit right with you at the time. And this is something that I find, um, like very kind of reassuring, I guess, is there's that there's this part of all of us, like that deep sense of self, that I truly, truly believe remains undamaged. It's just this innate part of who you are. It knows, it knows no matter how dysfunctional your programming was as a child, or in this last relationship or whatnot, it knows deep down of when something is problematic for you. And if you think back to those different situations, even though you didn't know what was wrong, you still, all of the signs that there was a problem were still there. You were perpetually confused. You had probably a lot of um, uh, going back and forth. Is it this person? Is it me? Am I making a big deal out of things? Am I being overly emotional? Um, you probably had your feelings hurt, or you felt unsafe around that person. Like maybe you didn't know why. You're like, I just don't want to, I don't know. I just don't want to go hug this person. Like maybe their family. Like, I don't want to go hug, my mom or my dad. I don't really know why. I just don't want to go hug them. or I don't want to visit, or I don't really feel comfortable being around them. Odds are there's been some, at a, if not full out abuse, there's been some boundary violations that have happened that have gone um, probably undiscussed and unhealed. And it's so it's so cool to see people start to kind of shed those layers and those limiting beliefs and those um, and to kind of step in reality and and realize, you know what, actually, yeah, I wasn't okay with that, and I'm going to need to do something different. And they start asserting themselves more and more and more, and their relationships, certain ones end up dropping off, but then other ones start flourishing, and as they start becoming more in tune with themselves. And that's kind of I just really feel like that is our natural baseline is is peace. It's to feel that sense of kind of just contentment, like, when something's not for you, whatever it might be. I don't know, you're in a job, um, and you're absolutely miserable. Like, when something's not for, or not even miserable, you're leaving every day and you're feeling like you want to cry, or you're feeling defeated, or absolutely exhausted, or you're having headaches all the time, or you're dreading going to work. There's all kinds of signs, that ways that we feel, and physical and emotional, when something's not for us. So yeah, getting in tune with that, of when something is for you and when something is not, when something's nourishing for you and then when something is draining for you. And the good news is it's always there. It's just us tapping into that and getting rid of these uh, disempowering disempowering beliefs that we've been carrying around. Ellen, thank you for the live stream donation. She asks, what is the new Facebook private page, and how or where can I get information on joining? Thank you as always. Your videos have given me the tools to change my life. Well, you are so very welcome. The There's a Facebook group that we have. You can, and I'm in the process of starting a support group on my website, which will be more uh, private, in the sense it's not connected to social media or anything like that. But for right now, you can find out more about the support group and all that if you go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com. And I want to say it's under the tab that says support. It has the link to the Facebook group, but I guess just realize the Facebook group, it's a closed group, which means that other people can see that you've joined. So if that's even a remote concern for you, um, I would encourage you to set up a fake profile on Facebook. Um, you know, if you're going to join my support group or join other people's support groups or whatnot, and hopefully we'll have the website more up and going here in the near future. It's been um, more of an undertaking than I anticipated. So, but yeah. So let's see. Um, Let me see. Let me scroll up here. Jennifer says, the abuse my dad bestowed upon me, I did once in a while when not disassociating, that was going on with me was technically wrong. And most likely other kids' parents didn't do this too. Oh, you knew that. Okay. She knew that what was going on with me was technically wrong, and most likely other kids' parents didn't do this too. But then I would go back to his justification of society being overprotective these days because, um, especially sexual abuse, happened to kids all the time in the Renaissance days. Yeah. Well, that that was his justification. That's part of that manipulation. The mental gymnastics that he was doing to try to convince himself that his behavior wasn't a problem. It's always been a problem. Just like if you were to say, if somebody were to try to excuse slavery and say, well, you know, it's not that big of a deal. It's not as bad as it was. I mean, it was used to be really, really big, a couple hundred years ago. But the reality is, no, it's always been a problem. Um, uh, just because it was done in the past doesn't mean that that's somehow okay or not a problem. If something's a problem, it's a problem. It doesn't matter. Um, you know, it, it doesn't matter if it was normalized at a certain point in society or not. And um, yeah, it's abusive people create justifications for themselves to convince themselves that they're not doing anything that's that bad. And also, especially with, they're using those same, that same twisted logic, because that's what it is, twisted logic uh, on their target. That's part of the manipulation. It's sort of like, see, I don't want to believe that there's a problem in what I'm doing. So I'm going to tell you, kind of all different kinds of things to make you realize that there's not a problem either. So this can keep continuing. It's it's twisted. Um, oh yikes, Fatima, hi. And yes, it's good to see you. She says there was a tornado warning near my area. Thank goodness it didn't hit my area. Yeah, no joke. Those are always scary, aren't they? Did you get like a tornado siren that goes off? Monica says, what can we do if we're afraid to seek therapy during a divorce? My best friend is divorcing a narcissist, and she's afraid to seek therapy in fear of her ex using that in court. Well, and like somebody had mentioned in the chat, and I lost, Gigi says, therapy is a protected privilege. Yes, and it is. So it depends on how they would try to use that in court. Um, if if they're going to use it and spin it in the sense of, oh, see how she's so unfit, she's in therapy. Thankfully we live in a day and time where there's not such a stigma around therapy. It's not people that are um, mentally unwell that are going to therapy. It's more people that are dedicated to their mental health that are going to therapy. So that doesn't do anything if uh, you have therapist client privilege, and um, could they subpoena the notes? They could. um, I've well, when I was working a domestic violence agency, we had that happen years ago. But here's the thing with, just FYI, most domestic violence agencies are super aware of that. It really doesn't happen that often. But when it does, the notes that a therapist, just FYI, a therapist at a domestic violence agency writes, they write them very vague, and with the intention of, if they were to get subpoenaed, that these notes would not provide any incriminating evidence. So the way that therapists do notes in um, private practice or a clinical setting versus in a domestic violence agency, totally different. So, um, but like I said, they can subpoena them. So even though it's protected privilege, if they were to go to that extent, that could be done. If she's even remotely concerned about that, I would encourage her to um, to reach out to a domestic violence agency, or um, if she is going to be seeing somebody in private practice, let him know that concern and say something like, I'm scared. I'm scared that my ex is going to try to use this against me. I'm scared that he or she might even go to the extent of trying to subpoena my notes from these sessions. And um, you know, and so I guess I'm just asking you to be mindful of that when you're writing things down. It's so different. And again, private practice or clinical practice, if she's going to be going through her insurance too, if she's going through insurance, they're going to have to come up with a diagnosis code. And that can, I mean, again, this is like, if her ex, soon to be ex, were to subpoena things, that would be part of what they would find, would be a diagnosis code. Um, this would be a conversation that she could have with the therapist, as far as really going the extra mile to protect, client confidentiality of, um, and asking the therapist, can I please see your notes? Like, that would just make me feel better to know kind of, what you're putting in there, or the diagnosis code that you're using. I'm just scared that my spouse is gonna, or my ex is gonna see, if she writes on there like depression or anxiety, or that it could be used against me, and it could impact my ability to have custody, or you name it. If um she goes to a domestic violence agency, there is no diagnosis code assigned, because in part, well, for added confidentiality, but there's no insurance billing that's being done. So um, I think her best bet would be, for like true peace of mind, is a domestic violence agency, because they don't play there. Like, like you work there for long enough, you see um, a lot of the tricks and the kind of the worst of the worst. Right. And that's true. Sky Dyson says the therapist can block the subpoena, and husband would have to explain why he wants this. Not likely to happen. I agree. Like, this is so um there'd have to be so many things that would line up, um that in order for that to happen, that um I can absolutely understand your friend's concern about wanting to seek therapy during all this, but um and I would just, and maybe that's worth talking to the therapist about um, before the first session, and just saying, like, what kind of um, protocols do they have in place for that, and letting them know your concerns. Fatima asks, can I reach you? How can I reach you? Dear Dana. It's Dear Dana at thriveafterabuse.com. If you have a question, is the best way to get a hold of me. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yep, that's a really valid point. Darlene was saying therapy is often seen as a strength by some judges, and you can always point out that it can show the severity of the harm he's caused. Yep. And Gigi says, yeah, therapy to grieve the relationship. That's all they need to know. That's well said. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's a life adjustment, right? The ending of a relationship, good or bad, needed or wanted or not wanted, it's still the ending of something, and there's still a grieving period. And it's not uncommon for people to go to therapy at the end, of a long relationship, or at the end of a significant relationship. Um, let's see, scrolling up here. Bonnie says, I only saw Never Ending Story 1. I didn't know they made a second. I think they made more than just the second. I think they've made a couple. Um, don't save yourself the time. They're really bad. I want to say it's the third one that just goes off the rails and like makes no sense whatsoever. It's really awful. Oh, the 80s. What were they thinking with some of these movies? So let's see. Yes, Fatima, I will email you tomorrow. Speaking of tomorrow, we have book club tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're going to be discussing a book. It's on Kaizen. It's the kind of Japanese art of small change. So kind of an seemingly unrelated book, but I thought it was helpful, and be curious to see what you guys think of it as well. So Huffle Mom was asking with an X, she says, well, he's not supposed to be allowed to access records at all without a signed release of information. That's one of the parts of HIPAA, right? Yes. Um, right. So you need, if an unauthorized person is trying, so if a person's authorized, if I were to say, oh yes, absolutely, here you can be my guest, you can read my medical file, you would need to sign something giving that release of information, for that to happen. If it's um, in that case, if there's an unauthorized request of information, then uh, the office would just say no, like, we're not authorized to give this to you. If they go and they get a subpoena, or if there's a court order to turn over, if there's a court order that they have to turn over records, it's my understanding that they have to turn them over. So that's, like I said, that's been my experience, which has been kind of limited with that. Um, um, the records that were turned over, and that was kind of why I was told, back then, like, this is why, one of the reasons we write very vague notes, um, was kind of for situations like this, where it was, you know, discussed parenting strategies, like that level of vague, or, um, you know, um, uh, yeah, mm, client spoke about, um, or I don't know, like, uh, life skills were discussed, um, coping mechanisms were discussed. Like, it's very vague and it's very brief. So, um, kind of for that reason. Yes, okay. Yes, you're right. I was only gonna, um, be on for a little bit, and I do need to go because I have to get up pretty early in the morning. So, okay. So with that said, I am going to sign off. I will see you guys tomorrow. Um, just lots of love to you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions, Mod Squad. Thank you for everything that you do. Uh, Lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will talk to you guys later. Okay. Good night.